to west, north and south of the globe, digital demand is unprecedented and driving hundreds of billions of dollars into digital infrastructure projects. Joining me now at PTC 2022 in Hawaii is Jabez Tan, Head of Research for Structure Research. Jabez, welcome to Hawaii, welcome to PTC. From what you've seen at the conference so far, what is the urgency around digital infrastructure deployment? How has the demand changed over recent times?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is that demand is accelerating and evolving. I think the two main things that we're seeing is number one, the decentralization of hyperscale, meaning that hyperscale is essentially centralized in a very few regions to begin with. So people are familiar with the flat markets, Northern Virginia, Silicon Valley, Singapore, Hong Kong. But that's evolving as demand requirements grow, as adoption increases, as remote working trends really start to take shape and become more permanent in our lives. We're seeing hyperscalers needing to extend their geographical reach and their cloud regions to smaller emerging markets. And that's really been a big driver for a lot of the co-location and data center operators in the industry as they look to capture the demand from edge-like cloud zones like AWS local zones, wavelengths, outposts. So that's number one. And then number two, what we're seeing is the need for more aggregation points. So what we're calling is kind of carrier hotel 2.0, where these carrier hotels that have traditionally housed all the networks, all the cloud on-ramps, they've actually been built in the early 2000s, sometimes in the 1990s, and they're really old, approaching end of life, low density, supply constrained, and there's a real need to have redundancy in the internet where it's not bottlenecked to these carrier hotels, and that's going to pave the way for more of these, a new wave of retail co-location 2.0 providers, edge data center operators that are looking to create new aggregation hubs across existing markets and also new emerging markets. So those are the two key things we're seeing.
Well, there's a lot of that. I mean, on the hyperscaler front, where do you say is the most demand coming from, especially in those new markets that people are going to? Because I think it was David Friedman from CyrusOne saying that, for example, he's seeing a lot more demand in Europe versus the US. Because I guess the hyperscalers, they come from the US, so they've built their footprint here long ago. But he's also mentioned a lot of challenges in Europe. So where do you see the demand coming from, and especially in new markets that are coming up now?
Yeah, so to be fair, my perspective skews to the Asia Pac region because that's where I spend most of my time. And we're seeing a lot of demand kind of transitioning from, Singapore and Hong Kong were the initial key hubs that saw a lot of demand. But due to kind of geopolitical issues and moratoriums and land constraints, a lot of the demand has gone outside to adjacent markets, and we're seeing the rise of Australia and Japan really come up in 2021 as these big demand hubs for cloud capacity. And also, these tier 2 markets that are eventually going to look like tier 1 markets in Asia, like Mumbai, like a Jakarta, like a Seoul. I mean, those markets could be at the Singapore status in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's Asia. And then in Europe, our team has done a great job of covering the European market. So FLAP obviously still very strong. I think most of the activity that we're seeing centers around still Frankfurt and London as these two core hubs, global hubs. Paris is starting to really overweight on the demand side, and that's driven by its proximity to Marseille as the gateway to Africa, and we've seen a lot of transactions recently take place in the African continent. And for ourselves, we've also been covering emerging markets in Europe like Madrid, Barcelona. We're looking at Milan, we're looking at Warsaw. So all of these markets we're seeing an overweight in demand coming from cloud and the decentralization of hyperscale, like I mentioned earlier. And then LATAM and Africa too, I mean, it's just firing on all cylinders.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it's everywhere, and it's becoming more and more decentralized, more and more distributed, and I think that's an overall really good thing for the industry.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's so much to unpack there. I mean, I think we're going to stay here for the whole hour. Southeast Asia, so you say that those markets can become sort of Singapore. I say each one of them could become Singapore, because if each one of them has a potential to become Singapore in the next 5 years, I mean, we're talking about, what, $100 billion each in investments?
Yeah, I think the way we see it is Singapore was the hub in Southeast Asia to serve the other countries because, there's corruption issues, regulatory uncertainty, and so a lot of the Western companies like Singapore for its stable government, ease of doing business, and access to a lot of the subsea cable aggregation points that land in Singapore. And so what I think is happening is because there's a lot of constraints from the supply side, from the power side in Singapore, that has led to overflow markets like Johor and Batam, Malaysia, Jakarta, that were traditionally served from Singapore, now finding that they need to be serve from their local jurisdiction. So Jakarta, a massive population, the size of the US population. So that's a lot of eyeballs that is typically a good proxy for data center demand in the future. So I think that's kind of the way it's playing out is Singapore used to serve Southeast Asia, but now there will be requirements for local compute and cloud regions within these countries to serve their local bases as well.
It will be amazing. I'm super excited about Asia because I think Asia, all the southern hemisphere to be honest, I think it's super exciting what's happening in that region. You mentioned Europe as well. You mentioned Marseille and France and Paris, but there's a lot of other markets there. Like, tell us what you're looking at, even from a structure perspective, what are you guys looking at in Europe? Because there's a lot of moving parts. Iberia, Greece, Nordics, Central Europe, North Europe. You mentioned something and there'll be a project there.
Yeah, I think Europe is hitting a really key inflection point, and the reason you can tell is because a lot of the US operators that have traditionally focused on the US markets are now pivoting hard and investing lots of resources in the European market. They're acquiring platforms in there, they're building out organically, they're getting new investments from infrastructure funds, private equity, sovereign wealth funds. So there's a lot of capital flowing into data center and digital infrastructure development, and that's fueled that boom in Europe. So I think the markets like Milan, Madrid, Barcelona, Paris, Marseille, even what we call the gateway markets like Vienna, Prague, Warsaw, Poland, even Brussels, Belgium, those markets, and even the Nordics too. Let's not forget the Nordics are also a key kind of component of the European market due to the climate-friendly efficiency advantages that it entails with data center development. So I think it's just such a dynamic market that's really hitting that inflection point, and a lot of the hyperscalers are investing heavily in expanding in Europe right now.
Forgot to mention Lisbon, but I'll let that one go.
Yes, I missed out on that one, so apologies to all the Portuguese out there.
No, apologies accepted. Looking at the globe now, so from what you're seeing, so from everything you just told me, all the markets that you're looking at, the research you're doing and everything, where would you say people need to keep an eye out? What's the hidden gem that we are not seeing yet on the global stage?
Yeah, if I knew that question, I'd be a billionaire. But I think because we're so focused on the interplay between data center infrastructure and a hyperscale cloud, that it's really been such a dynamic ecosystem that's evolving. We're rejigging and rewriting our taxonomy on how we define data centers. Even for hyperscale, it used to just be wholesale hyperscale and retail, but now hyperscale is so complex that there's a core hyperscale segment, there's an edge hyperscale segment, and there's subsegments between, below that we're tracking in terms of all the edge deployments that are happening from AWS and Microsoft and Google and Oracle and even the Chinese cloud. So that's, I think, the most exciting thing is seeing the edge really start to take shape. I know people talked about the edge in the past, and it was this kind of nebulous concept and marketing jargon, but now it's actually really starting to take shape in the form of like real investment, real infrastructure being deployed, real kind of customer demand coming from hyperscale and content and networks. So I think this year we're starting to see the real kind of signs of that taking shape, and I think next year it'll be even kind of more clear where the direction is headed.
Yeah, that goes straight in line with also what Mark Ganzi said, and the focus of Digital Bridge all around edge infrastructure, and his keynote was all around that. But you mentioned taxonomy. That's quite interesting because I think sometimes it's good to actually go back to ABC. So the taxonomy is changing, the notions of hyperscales and everything. Can you just guide us through the ABC of the data center definition nowadays on the hyperscale side, the colocation side, retail, oil, say everything?
Yeah, I think the tough part is that the lines are blurring, and I think the best way to illustrate that is, how like Equinix used to just be purely retail colo, but now they're moving into hyperscale. Digital Realty used to be known for their hyperscale wholesale kind of niche, but then they're moving into retail with acquisitions of Interaction. So I think the lines are blurring between clearly defined segments of data center co-location. And the reason is because there is a real need for everything to be integrated and seamlessly integrated in order to deliver a complete solution to the end user, to the customer. And so you'll see kind of hybrid models take shape. You'll see more and more adoption of the public cloud. You'll see more automated kind of bare metal start to roll out in performance requirements from gaming and all of that stuff. So there's I think a big opportunity from gaming. Microsoft today just announced a $69 billion investment in Activision Blizzard. So that's validation of, I think, the overall trend that the industry is headed and the investments that are taking place.
And then if we add the metaverse into it, then we're talking about trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
Taking into account your focus on Asia, we've got big cloud players in Asia like Tencent, Alibaba, Alibaba, Huawei is trying to dip their toes into it as well. Do you see a new AWS, a new Google coming from that side of the world?
Yeah, I think the two most interesting cloud disruptors that we're seeing is, number one is ByteDance. They've traditionally been known for TikTok and social media, their social media algorithms that they've used to generate such a huge user growth for their platform. And what we are seeing from them is they are now making that TikTok recommendation engine algorithm available to startups and other companies to license on a SaaS or platform basis, and then kind of delivering as their own cloud services, and maybe even move into what we traditionally know as the public cloud, right? Like so compute, storage, and analytics, and all of that stuff. So it'd be interesting to see how ByteDance approaches their cloud strategy. So that's number one. I think number two, another interesting player is Cloudflare, that's also traditionally known for CDNs and delivering content and layering security on top of that.
Where's Cloudflare from?
Cloudflare is from the US, so they're publicly traded.
But they're in Asia.
Oh yeah, they're rolling that out across the world. They're delivering an S3 competitive product called R2. S3, R2. They're kind of
all the technical side.
Yeah, so they're growing kind of that they're trying to disrupt AWS in that way in terms of how they're approaching cloud storage. So I think that's coming, from the US, but it'll make its way to Asia eventually, and then ByteDance obviously Asia-based. We'll see that kind of take shape across the world. But that's kind of the key. Kind of the new developments that we're tracking here at Structured Research.
Super interesting, especially ByteDance. But Jabez, PTC 2022, Hawaii, beautiful sun, beautiful view. You can hear the waves. You've got the helicopters passing by. 12 months time, we're going to be back, hopefully with the same kind of weather. What do you think is going to be the major topic for next year? This year, this is all about reuniting and just discussing what's happened over the last 12 months. But what's going to be the next 12 months like, and that's going to really guide the program and the discussions?
Yeah, I think for me this year was a lot about rebuilding the bonds that were formed in 2020 and before that. So just reconnecting with people on a real kind of face-to-face level. And so people are kind of getting updates on, hey, what's been happening for the last 2 years for you? What are you working on? So people, I think, are digesting and consolidating all the trends and experiences that they've had over the last 2 years. And I think next year will be kind of kicked into next year where actual real partnerships, real collaborations, real synergies are going to take place across the entire ecosystem. And I'm really excited for that to happen next year.
The decision making, yeah. I'm super excited to come back, to be honest with you. And next year we're going to have a massive studio somewhere, hopefully.
Yeah.
Sit there and no more masks as well.
Yeah, maybe an interview in a helicopter, who knows, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the budget can afford that much, but we'll see. I'll try to accommodate your requests. Maybe on the road, they'll probably be more doable.
Yeah.
And less headache with insurance as well. But Jabez Tan, thank you so much for talking to me. For you at home, thank you for watching, and don't forget to check our website and give us a follow on social media for the latest news and features from across the world in digital infrastructure. At the Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.